You drive me crazy. I can't get enough of you.
Okay, so here's the thing about me. I am not, by any reasonable definition, an unlucky person. I just have a gift for finding myself in situations that look absolutely catastrophic from the outside. But if you give me like 45 seconds and a chance to explain, you would see the logic when I break them down. My name is Carleen Benson. I'm 23, currently finishing my last semester at Yonsei University on a full academic scholarship, and I have, at various points in the last 6 months, worked as a private English tutor, a late-night cafe cashier, a hand model for a cosmetics brand that paid me in product instead of cash. Do not ask me why. And most recently, a luxury villa cleaner for a company called Clean Elite Soul. The listing had said, one-time deep clean of a private penthouse residence, Gangnam District, 50,000 won, 3 hours maximum, owner will not be present. 50,000 won, for 3 hours of work. In this economy, that is practically a miracle. I said yes so fast I forgot to read the second paragraph, which I later found out contained the extremely important detail that the owner was a private individual with specific preferences. I had no idea, whatever that meant. The agency coordinator, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Kang, who always smelled faintly of lavender, just handed me a key card, gave me the address, and said, "He won't be back for 2 days, so take your time, dear." Ooh, just found out that my client is a male. Okay, fine. I had absolutely no business being nervous about cleaning a stranger's apartment. All I have to do is to just clean, right? Get paid and leave. Simple. Except the penthouse wasn't just an apartment. It was magnificent. Listen, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've walked through some beautiful houses in my life. My Aunt Renee had a gorgeous Victorian in Buckhead that she spent 20 years restoring. But this place was something that didn't have a word yet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, marble everywhere. Art on the walls that looked like it should be in a museum, not a hallway. A kitchen that made me audibly gasp, and I don't even cook. I did my job. I did it well, actually. If I'm going to do something, I do it right. 3 hours of genuine work, every surface gleaming, every room done. And I was proud of my work. I brought out my phone and texted Mrs. Kang, all done. Should I leave the keycard under the mat? She replied, "The wine on the counter is for you, dear. It's raining terribly and there's no car service tonight. The guest room is prepared. You may stay and leave in the morning. He won't be back until Thursday. Try and rest well." Now, I want to be very clear about what happened next, because there are 2 ways to tell this story, and one of them makes me sound irresponsible, and the other one makes me sound like a perfectly reasonable human being who made a series of small logical decisions that compounded in an unfortunate situation. It was raining, hard, like Seoul in October hard, the kind of rain that soaks through your jacket in 30 seconds. I had no umbrella. My apartment was 40 minutes away by subway. The guest room had a mattress that looked like it cost more than my annual tuition. I had 1 glass of wine. Actually, I had 2 glasses of wine because the wine was delicious and I was celebrating a productive evening. Also, the mattress had already called to me by that point. Rich people have an unfair advantage when it comes to beds. There ought to be a law. I fell asleep in approximately 4 minutes. I was in the middle of the best dream of my life, where I was at a Paris Fashion Week after-party and everyone kept complimenting my braids, which was fair enough, because these braids took 8 hours and I am very proud of them, when I suddenly felt like I was being watched. You know that feeling, when you're half asleep but some primal part of your brain goes, "Wake up." My eyes flew open in that instant. And right there, in the doorway of what I had assumed was a very safe and unoccupied guest room, stood a man. The first thing I registered was that he was tall. The second thing I registered was that he was looking at me with an expression that I can only describe as someone who has opened their refrigerator expecting orange juice and found a live flamingo instead. The third thing I registered, and this is the part that really got me, was that he was, without any exaggeration whatsoever, the most aesthetically devastatingly handsome human being I had ever seen in person. Strong jaw, dark eyes, black hair pushed back from his face. He was wearing a stylish navy blue overcoat like he'd just walked off the cover of a magazine, and his expression, once the initial shock wore off, settled into something cold and sharp and deeply, deeply unimpressed. "Who are you?" he said, not a question, rather a statement, with the kind of voice that was used to being answered immediately. I sat up so fast, I almost headbutted the headboard. "Okay, Carleen," I tried to mentally calm myself. "You are a grown woman with a 3.9 GPA and excellent problem-solving skills. This is fine. You just have to explain yourself calmly." "I'm the cleaner," I said, too loud, way too loud. Sorry, is this your?" I stuttered, having absolutely no idea who he was. "Mrs. Kang said you weren't coming back until Thursday." "It should be Wednesday." I stared at him. He stared back at me. "I was told Thursday," I said carefully. "You were told wrong." He crossed his arms. "This is my property. You have 30 seconds to explain why you're sleeping in my guest room before I call security." Now look, I understand that from his perspective. Coming home to find an unfamiliar woman in your bed is alarming. I get that. I'm not unreasonable. But there was something in the way he said it, that flat, dismissive tone, like I was an inconvenience he intended to remove. That lit a very specific fire inside me that I have spent my entire life trying to manage. My mother calls it the Benson temper. I took a breath. I work for Clean Elite Soul. I have a contract and a key card. I cleaned this entire penthouse, which, by the way, took 3 hours and was spotless when I finished. My coordinator told me to stay due to the weather. I apologize for the misunderstanding and I will leave immediately. I swung my legs off the bed. You can call Mrs. Kang if you'd like to verify. Something flickered in his expression, like he was suddenly recalculating his move. You have an accent, he said. I'm American, I said. Atlanta. You speak Korean. I've been studying here for 3 years. I was pulling on my jacket. Again, I'm sorry for the confusion. This was clearly a miscommunication on the agency's part, not mine. He watched me with those dark eyes like I was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve yet. Then he reached into his coat pocket and produced a slim envelope. For the inconvenience, he said, and held it out. I looked at the envelope and then looked at him. What is that? Compensation, beyond your original fee. Something about the way he did it, it felt transactional and insulting, like he was paying a vending machine, and that made my jaw tighten. I don't want your money, I said. I need to go home. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised, like I had said something in a strange language he didn't understand. Everyone wants money, he said. Not me, I replied briskly, and walked out of his guest room, down his marble hallway, into his elevator, and out of his building into the cold Seoul rain. I was completely soaked by the time I got to the subway. I also left my good umbrella behind, which I didn't realize until I was already on the train. I didn't think about him again. I had bigger things on my plate, specifically my final year of school, my academic thesis, and the fact that my younger brother Darius had been in the hospital for 2 months back in Atlanta with a serious heart condition that my mother kept trying to handle without telling me the real cost, which I estimated, based on what she wasn't saying, was an amount we clearly couldn't afford. I had 3 part-time jobs and a scholarship and a savings account that I kept adding to like I was building a wall against disaster. I didn't have time to think about the devastatingly handsome stranger with cold, dark eyes and a voice that sounded like it had never once been told no in his entire life. I didn't think about him at all. That was until I walked into my business management lecture 3 days later and saw him standing at the front of the room. I had gotten there late. I'd just finished a 2-hour tutoring session across campus, and I was still pulling my braids into a ponytail as I slipped into the auditorium, where my best friend and roommate Destiny had saved me a seat in the 3rd row. Destiny, Kim? Yes. She was Korean American. Her dad is from Busan, and she is the most stylish person I know. She had her laptop open and was typing furiously. You're almost late, she whispered. I'm exactly on time, I whispered back, which was a lie, but she let it go. This guest lecturer is supposed to be insane, like, actually impressive. Not just the kind of impressive for a guest lecture. He is the real kind. I was settling into my seat, pulling out my notebook, not really paying attention. What's his background? Business, finance, tech, like multiple companies, apparently he's. The door at the front of the room opened, and he walked in. I'm going to be honest with you. For about 2 full seconds, I genuinely thought my brain was having a malfunction. Like maybe I hadn't slept enough and I was hallucinating, because there was no way, no reasonable, logical way, that the man currently setting his leather portfolio on the lectern was the same man I had faced down in a penthouse guest room while wearing an oversized university hoodie at midnight 3 days ago. But it was him. Same jaw, same dark eyes, same energy that made the room feel like it had rearranged itself slightly to accommodate him. He was wearing a dark suit today, deep charcoal, perfectly fitted, and when he looked up at the lecture hall, his gaze swept the room in that same unhurried, assessing way, like he was accounting for variables. When his eyes reached the 3rd row, they stopped. I looked down at my notebook, so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. "Hello," he said, and his voice was exactly as I remembered it, low, precise, carrying authority the way some people carry luggage. "My name is Yi Shin. I'll be speaking with you today on strategic direction in emerging markets." Destiny made a sound beside me that was frankly inappropriate for an academic setting. I did not look up from my notebook. He recognized me. He definitely recognized me. I could feel it from across the room, and that was not a feeling I enjoyed at all. The lecture was, and I cannot stress this enough against my will, genuinely excellent. He was the kind of speaker who didn't perform intelligence. He just had it, and it showed up in the precision of every sentence, the way he anticipated questions before they were asked, the way he structured his arguments like someone who had already considered and discarded every counterpoint. Even when I was actively trying not to listen, I was listening. About 40 minutes in, he paused and looked at the audience. "Let's make this interactive," he said. "I'll pose a question. If a company is choosing between 2 markets, one established with predictable returns, one emerging with significantly higher risk but proportional upside, which do they choose and why?" "You." His gaze landed directly on me. "In the 3rd row." Of course. He just pointed at me, exactly when I thought he didn't notice me. In that exact moment, every face in the auditorium turned toward me. Destiny made a tiny noise of delighted horror beside me. I immediately sat up straight and met his eyes, because whatever happens, I was not going to be caught flinching. "The emerging market," I said slowly. "Why?" Because I had actually done my readings, and because spite is an excellent motivator, I took a deep breath and gave him the full answer. Because the question assumes the 2 options are stable versus risky, but that framing is misleading. An established market with predictable returns in today's economy is really just a market where the disruption hasn't arrived yet. The risk isn't less, it's just less visible. The emerging market at least tells you where the volatility is, and if you know where the volatility is, you can price it and plan around it. Everywhere in the auditorium went silent. "Go on, continue," he urged me on. I blinked. "I'm done." "No, you're not. You're describing the information advantage, but you're not addressing the resource question. Most companies don't have unlimited capital to absorb emerging market losses while waiting for the upside. How do you account for that?" "Oh, he wanted to spar. Fine, we could spar." "Strategic partnerships," I said. "You enter the emerging market with a local operator who already absorbs some of the capital risk in exchange for market access. Your exposure is limited. Your upside is shared but not eliminated." Another pause. This one felt different from the first, less assessing, more like he was recalibrating something. "That is," he said slowly, "a structurally sound answer." Then, without another glance at me, he turned back to the rest of the auditorium. "The student in the 3rd row has just described the foundational logic behind joint ventures in high-growth economies. This is not a coincidence. The people who succeed in business are usually the ones who instinctively translate risk into information rather than fear." Destiny grabbed my arm under the desk and squeezed. I stared at my notebook and told my face very firmly to stay neutral. After the lecture, while students swarmed the front of the room, I headed for the exit. Fast. I had a shift starting in an hour and I needed to eat first, and I had absolutely zero interest in. "Miss Benson," he called, and I stopped against my will. Then slowly I turned around. He was standing a few feet away, having extracted himself from the cluster of students swarming around him, with the ease of someone who had been excusing himself from unwanted attention his entire life. Up close, in daylight, lecture hall fluorescent light, which is close enough, he looked like someone had designed him to be exactly this distracting, and then signed off on all the specifications. "You left something at my residence," he said, and held out my umbrella. I stared at it. It was my favorite umbrella, matte black with a wooden handle and a small embroidered peach on the canopy, because my grandmother called me Peach, and I'd had it since I was 19. I'd assumed it was gone forever. "How did you know my name?" I asked. "The agency provided it when I called to confirm the cleaning was completed. Your work was thorough." He paused, watching me intently, then he continued. "I must admit that I'm surprised." The word surprised did not escape me. "I do everything thoroughly," I said, taking the umbrella. "Thank you for returning it." "You didn't take the envelope," he said. I noticed. "Why not?" I stared at him. He was genuinely asking. I could tell because there was no sharpness in his expression, just an actual curiosity, like someone who had encountered a variable outside their model and wanted to understand it. "Because you offered it the way you'd pay off an inconvenience," I said. "I'm not an inconvenience. I'm a person. There's a difference." I adjusted my bag strap. "Have a good day, Mr. Shin," he said. "Yi Shin." "Mr. Shin," I nodded. "Thanks for the umbrella." And I walked away from him for the second time. This time, I also did not look back. I wanted to. Gosh, I really do, but I didn't. Okay, pause. Before we go any further, I have to ask you something real quick, because I've been trying to figure out where people who love good stories are actually watching from these days. Are you team phone in bed, reading this with your brightness all the way down? Team laptop at work with 3 other tabs open pretending to be busy? Or team living room TV, comfortable on your couch with a snack in hand like this is appointment television? Drop a comment and let me know your team, and tell me where in the world you're watching this story from. I will personally reply to every single comment in the first hour. Hit that like and subscribe button. It genuinely helps more than you know. Now, let's proceed. The problem with life is that it is persistently inconvenient. You make a decision. I'm going to forget about the extremely handsome man with the expensive apartment and the very irritating habit of being right about everything. And then life just absolutely refuses to cooperate. I got home to voicemail from my mother. My mother, Vivian Benson, is the most elegant woman I have ever known. She was a dancer before she became an administrator, and she still moves like music, and she has a soothing voice that could narrate Nat Geo wild documentaries. She also has that specific skill that almost all Black mothers seem to be born with, which is delivering catastrophic news in a completely calm tone, so that you don't realize how bad it is until you're already 2 sentences in and too invested to hang up. "Baby," the voicemail said, "don't panic because everything is going to be fine. Darius's surgery got moved up. They want to do it in 3 weeks instead of 6, which is good news medically speaking. The only thing is," she paused. The silence lasted a few milliseconds. It was so small that most people would miss it, but I know my mother. Then she continued. "The deposit is due in 10 days. It's significant, but don't you worry. I'm talking to Auntie Renee and I'll figure something out. You just focus on your studies. I love you." I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand and did the math. The deposit was $50,000. My mother did not have $50,000. Auntie Renee, bless her heart, had $50,000 worth of Victorian real estate and not $50,000 in liquid cash. My savings account had $8,000 in it, which had taken me 2 years to build, and which I had been adding to like a prayer. $8,000 was not $50,000. I put my phone face down on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, calmly and rationally, about what I was going to do. Destiny knocked and came in with 2 cups of ramen because she has a 6th sense for when I'm spiraling. She sat cross-legged on my floor, looked at my face, and said, "How bad?" Medium bad, I said. Darius's surgery. Ah, she handed me a cup. What do you need? A better paying job, I said, and possibly a different family situation. One of those I can actually help with, she said. Campus career fair is in 2 weeks. Some of the companies coming are, she paused, beaming. Carly, the Shin Group is coming. I looked at her. Don't look at me like that, she said. I didn't plan this, but their entry-level analyst salaries are almost double the market rate, and they do tuition support for graduate applications and… I am not, I said carefully, applying to Yi Shin's company. You don't even know if he's involved in the hearing. Destiny. And even if he were, you gave a genuinely brilliant answer in that lecture, and everyone heard it, including him. And you're one of like 4 people in this entire university who actually understood his market risk question. So. Destiny. She ignored me, taking a bite of her noodles. Then she shrugged with a stuffed mouth, saying, What if the universe is trying to tell you something? The universe should mind its own business, I replied, rolling my eyes and focused on the spicy ramen. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my Aunt Gloria, who is my mother's older sister and who I love dearly, but she approaches my life with the energy of a competitive sport. The text read, Carleen baby, I'm in Seoul next week visiting my friend Janet. We should have dinner. I found someone I want you to meet. His name is Christopher and he is wonderful. A real estate developer, very successful, very handsome. He asked about you specifically after I showed him your photo. Please say yes. Love, Auntie G. I read this 3 times. Okay, the problem here is that my ex-boyfriend was also named Chris. Christopher Daniels. We dated for 2 years before I came to Seoul, and the relationship had ended in a mess, in a way that gets me triggered whenever I hear the name Chris. I literally had avoided talking stages because the guy's name was Chris. Family is everything, right? I didn't want to disrespect my aunt or explain to her about my trauma, so I groaned and said yes. The restaurant she chose was in Gangnam. Nice. Very nice, actually. The kind of nice that made me glad I'd worn my nice dress, with my braids down and my gold hoops in. I looked like someone who had it together, which was aspirational, but I was committing to the bit. Christopher was already there when I arrived, and he was fine. Handsome in a way that required no second look. Tall, put together, clearly comfortable in expensive restaurants, which is a skill not everyone has. He stood when I approached the table, like a true gentleman, which I appreciated. Carleen, he said, with a smile that had clearly been practiced. You look beautiful, your aunt described you well. She actually undersold you. She can be like that sometimes, I joked, sitting down. Don't hold it against her. The dinner was pleasant. Christopher was smart, conversational, had opinions about architecture that were actually interesting. He asked good questions and listened to the answers, which puts him in the top 30% of blind dates statistically. I was starting to think this might have been a perfectly reasonable evening. And then I looked up from the menu and saw Yi Shin at the table across the room. He was with 2 other people, a woman who carried herself with the easy authority of someone accustomed to being in charge, and a younger man who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. They were clearly in a business dinner, papers on the table, conversations low and pointed. Yi Shin was facing my direction. His eyes met mine. I looked back at the menu, trying everything to stay and appear calm, even though I was starting to freak out. So your aunt mentioned you're finishing your final year, Christopher started with a conversation. What's next for you? Are you going back to the States? Maybe, I said. I'm looking at opportunities here too. I like Seoul. It wasn't a lie. I did like Seoul. It had gotten under my skin in the way cities do when they match your pace, fast and layered and full of small, beautiful things hiding in obvious places. Smart woman, Christopher smiled. The market here is for someone with your background. He glanced past me and his expression shifted slightly. I think I just saw someone I know. That's Yi Shin, isn't it? The Shin Group. I wouldn't know, I said. It is. I've tried to get a meeting with his development team for 6 months. He adjusted his tie. Do you know him? We've met briefly, I said carefully. Really? Christopher was already calculating. I could see it. Would you mind introducing us? Christopher, please, I replied pleasantly. I'm going to stop you right there and save us both some awkwardness. He laughed a little too sheepish. Fair enough, I understand. The rest of dinner was fine. I had good food and reasonable conversation, and when Christopher offered to share a cab, I said I was fine, thanks, and meant it. We exchanged numbers in the polite way that means neither of us will use them, and I stepped out of the restaurant into the cool night air and told myself I'd had a perfectly adequate evening. Miss Benson. I closed my eyes for one breath, then I turned around. He was standing near the restaurant entrance, his coat on, phone in hand. The other two people he'd been dining with were saying their goodbyes beside a waiting car. Mr. Shin, I said, do you live in this neighborhood too, or are you just following me? His lips curved into a smile. I had a business dinner. I see you had a date. I had dinner with an acquaintance, I corrected. He was looking at you the way men look at things they want to acquire, he said, in the same casual tone you'd discuss whether. It was quite obvious. I stared at him. That is, I paused, trying to calm my rising temper. That is a ridiculous comment you needed not to make. Apologies, he agreed, but you looked like you were thinking the same thing and restraining yourself. He stared at me, taking his time to let me catch the full impact of his words. Then he finished. I don't restrain myself as much. I've noticed, I said smugly, and then, because I apparently had no self-preservation instincts, looks like your business dinner ended abruptly. It concluded. He glanced at his phone, then back at me. My driver is 2 minutes away. Are you taking the subway? I like the subway. It's late. I'm a grown woman. I didn't say you weren't. His eyes briefly tracked down the full length of my body, as if confirming that I truly was a grown woman. I said it's late. There's a difference. We stood there, staring at each other. Are you offering me a ride? I asked. I'm just trying to say that my driver is going past Yonsei, he said. You may draw your own conclusions. I allowed his suggestion to win. I finally got in the car, sat on the far side of the back seat and looked out the window. He sat on his side and was busy on his phone. Neither of us spoke throughout the ride, and it was somehow both perfectly comfortable and deeply unsettling being in such close proximity with him at the same time. When his driver stopped at the Yonsei campus gate, I said, "Thank you for the ride." "The career fair," he said, without looking up from his phone. "You should apply to the Shin group." I stopped with my hand on the door. "Excuse me." "Your answer in the lecture was structurally correct and instinctively original. That combination is rare. The Shin group is recruiting analyst candidates." He looked at me then, and there was an expression that I couldn't read easily, which was irritating. "You should apply." "Because you think I'm qualified," I said slowly. "Or because you think you'd like keeping me where you can see me." He looked genuinely surprised. Then the corner of his mouth curved into a brief smile. This was the first time I'd seen him smile, and it was somehow more devastating than everything else I've ever seen. I was immediately struck in awe, then he replied, pulling me away from my trance. "Both," he replied. "Good night, Miss Benson." I nodded and slowly got out of the car, walked to my dormitory building, went upstairs, and sat on the edge of my bed, where I had a very stern conversation with myself about what I was, and was not going to do with this crazy situation that I'm gradually roping myself into. Then I opened my laptop and looked up the Shin Group's analyst application. I told myself that I was applying because of the attractive salary, purely for the salary and the benefits and the tuition support. This was a practical decision made by a practical person. Yi Shin had nothing to do with it. The application deadline was in 48 hours. I submitted mine in 47. 4 days after I submitted the application, I was in the middle of a tutoring session. My Korean student was 13, aggressively allergic to past perfect tense, and had begun spelling beautiful in a way that suggested he and the English language were in a serious conflict, when my phone lit up with a call from a Seoul number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, finished the session. Then I listened to the message while I was walking down the hallway on my way out. "Miss Benson, this is the HR team at Shin Group Holdings. Your application has been reviewed and we're pleased to offer you a position in our strategic analysis team. Please come in for onboarding next Monday. Congratulations. I stood still in the hallway for a full 15 seconds. Before I recovered, then called my mother to tell her I'd gotten the job, and she cried a little. I spiced it up a bit when I told her about the salary, and she cried even more. I said, "Mom, I think we can finally figure out Darius's deposit." But she said, "Baby, I told you not to worry about that," which meant she had been worrying about it every single waking hour for weeks. I did the math again. If I could get an advance on my first 3-month salary, which was not guaranteed but there should be a possibility and I intended to negotiate, and combined with my savings and the amount my mother had managed to put together, we'd be close. Very close. Possibly close enough. It wasn't solved, but it was closer to solvable. The problem presented itself on Monday morning when I walked into Shin Group's lobby and came face to face with the fact that the company was enormous. I mean, I knew it was large. I'd done my research. But reading about something on the internet and physically standing in a marble lobby with a 40-foot atrium and looking up at 17 floors of glass and steel are different experiences. This was not just a company. This was a freaking ecosystem. HR was smooth and professional. I filled out paperwork, got my access card, received a folder about benefits that I read 3 times. The salary was what the posting had promised. The benefits were exceptional. There was a healthcare package for dependents that included international coverage, and I had to reread this twice to be sure I wasn't imagining it. International coverage, which meant Darius, if I arranged it properly, might be covered. I was still processing this when HR walked our cohort, 4 of us, new analyst hires, toward the strategy division. I was in the back of the group, mentally recalculating numbers, when the HR coordinator said, "You'll be meeting your division head first, and then." In that instant, the elevator opened. And there was Yi Shin. Because of course, the universe had apparently decided that my entire soul experience was going to be organized around this man's proximity to whatever room I happened to be standing in. He was coming out of a meeting, 2 people in his wake, speaking rapidly to someone on his phone. He glanced at the group of new hires, and for just a moment, probably half a second, his eyes found mine. There was no expression, not even a silent acknowledgement. Then he kept walking. "That's CEO Shin," the HR coordinator murmured, slightly starstruck in the way that everyone in this building seemed to be slightly starstruck by him. "He doesn't usually pass through this floor during onboarding. You're lucky to see him." I said nothing. The girl next to me made a small sound of admiration that I completely understood, but somehow found annoying. My direct supervisor in the analyst division turned out to be a woman named Manager Yoon, mid-30s, sharp, the kind of efficient that made you want to be more efficient just by being in her space. She was also, I realized quickly, someone who had gotten her position entirely on merit and had 0 patience for anything below her standard. She also, within the first hour, made it very clear that she had not requested a foreign hire for her team. She even said it with a professional smile and language that sounded diversity supportive, but anyone within earshot could tell that her words meant something else entirely. "You'll need to prove you understand the local market dynamics," she said to me, her eyes assessing me coldly. "I hope you're ready to learn quickly." "I'm a fast learner," I replied, ignoring the negative energy I was getting from her. "Good." She handed me a file 3 inches thick. "We have a supplier review meeting on Thursday. These contracts need analysis by Wednesday morning. I assume that's no problem." The stack of contracts was huge. It would have been a reasonable 3 weeks task for someone already familiar with the company's systems. I had only barely 3 days and was new. She knew all that. "No problem," I managed to say, and took the file, and did not let a single conflicting emotion show on my face. I worked until 2 in the morning for those nights. I found 4 significant discrepancies in the contracts, 2 overpricing structures, 1 supplier term that was subtly but meaningfully non-standard, and 1 clause that, if I was reading it correctly, created a liability that nobody seemed to have flagged. I wrote it all up, formatted it, and had it on Manager Yoon's desk by 7 Wednesday morning. And then I sat at my desk and waited. At 9 o'clock, Manager Yoon called me into her office. She looked at me across the desk with an expression I couldn't fully read. "Where did you find the liability clause?" "Page 47, I said. "Section, the indemnification language is written in a way that would technically expose the company to third-party claims that should be the supplier's responsibility. It's not obvious. It's only a problem if you read the contract alongside the relevant regulatory code, which I referenced in the footnotes." She paused, totally not expecting this. "The previous analyst team reviewed these contracts for 2 weeks and couldn't find this," she finally said. Manager Yoon looked at me for a long moment. Then, without a word, she picked up her phone. 30 minutes later, I was in a conference room on the 14th floor presenting my findings to a group of people I hadn't been warned about, including Manager Yoon, 2 senior directors, and Yi Shin, who sat at the end of the table with his hands folded and said nothing for the entire presentation. I made sure my expression absolutely focused on my presentation. No distraction was allowed. When I finished, there was a short silence. "The liability clause alone," one of the directors said, "would have cost us approximately 200 million won if that contract had gone to litigation." I kept silent. "And you've only been here for just 3 days?" he asked. "I'm a fast learner," I replied, for the second time in a week. Yi Shin's eyes were on me. When I glanced at him, just briefly, the expression on his face was the same one he'd had in the lecture hall when I finished my answer. "Good work, Miss Benson," he finally said. That was all, 2 words. And then he turned to the directors and the meeting continued, and I sat in my chair and finally exhaled. I had been holding my breath since the first moment I stepped into this room and was placed right there, in the spotlight. On the way back to the analyst floor, Manager Yoon walked beside me in silence for a moment. Then she said, "The liability clause. Did you know about it before you reviewed the file, or did you find it fresh?" I replied, "I had no prior knowledge of the contracts." Then she looked at me and said, in the crisp way of someone who is very rarely wrong and finds apologizing uncomfortable, "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about you that I shouldn't have." "I appreciate that," I replied, and meant it. Somehow, we understood each other after that. I'd been at Shin Group for 3 weeks when I sat down and did the real math, not the optimistic version, but the actual version. Darius's surgery deposit, my mother's existing debt, the follow-up costs over the next 6 months post-surgery, my tuition for the final semester, living expenses in Seoul. The numbers did not add up. Not even close. I sat at my desk after everyone had gone home, the Seoul city lights spread out below the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I looked at the spreadsheet I'd made and thought about all the things I hadn't done yet. Hadn't asked for, hadn't tried, hadn't been willing to make myself vulnerable enough to attempt. My phone buzzed. A text from Destiny, "Are you still at the office? It's 10 p.m., Carly. Come home." Then another text, from a number I'd saved simply as Shin Group CEO, because he'd texted me with his official line once about a document discrepancy, and I'd saved it without thinking about what it meant. The light in the analyst office is still on. "Go home, Miss Benson." I looked up. The building across the atrium, the executive floor, was lit. He was still here, too. I texted back, "You first." 3 seconds, then his text popped in, insubordination. Despite everything, the spreadsheet, the numbers, the weight of all of it, I giggled. Just a small one, but it was enough to warm my insides and fill me with glee. Then I packed up and went home. The next morning, I walked into the HR office and asked about the possibility of an advance. The HR director was kind but clear. Company policy didn't allow salary advances for employees in their first 3 months. There was a hardship provision, but it required documentation and a review committee and took 6 to 8 weeks. I didn't have 6 to 8 weeks. I said thank you and went back to my desk and stared at my screen for a while. And then I did the thing I had been refusing to do since the night in the penthouse, when he'd held out the envelope, and I'd walked away. I found Yi Shin's direct line, not through official channels, but through the organizational chart I had memorized because I memorize things quickly. It's how I'm built. Then I summoned the courage to text him. I need to speak with you. Not about work. It's about a personal matter. I understand if that's not appropriate, and I won't mention it again if you say no. His reply came in 60 seconds. My office, 6 p.m. He was at his desk when I arrived, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, in the particular mode of concentrated focus that I'd noticed he inhabited for most of the workday. He looked up when I came in and gestured at the chair across from him, and something about the efficiency of the gesture, no performance, no ceremony, made the words come easier than I'd expected. My brother needs surgery, I confessed. It's a cardiac issue and it's in Atlanta. The deposit is due in 9 days and I'm $40,000 short. I know you offered me money once and I refused it, and I want to say clearly that I'm not asking for a gift. I'm asking for a loan. I will sign whatever documentation you want. I'll set up automatic repayments from my salary. I'll pay interest. I stopped. I need the surgery to happen, and I can't make it happen on my own right now. He was silent and kept looking at me. Not the assessing look I was used to from him, but something else, quieter, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Your brother's name, he said. Darius, he's 20. What's the prognosis without surgery? They said. I stopped. The numbers I'd memorized were clinical, and I didn't want to say them out loud in someone else's office. Not good. Another silence. The Shin Group has a corporate healthcare partnership, he said. That includes international surgical coverage for employees' immediate family members. You enrolled when you joined. I stared at him. Yes, but the enrollment form said coverage begins after a 90-day qualifying period. The qualifying period, he said, is waived for pre-existing emergency conditions. It's in subsection 4 of the benefits addendum. It's not prominently noted. He then finished. I'm nodding it now. I didn't speak. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. There's still the out-of-pocket deposit the hospital requires before international coverage is processed, I said, once I'd found my voice. That part doesn't go away. No, he agreed. It doesn't. He picked up his phone and made a call in rapid Korean that I followed well enough to understand he was speaking to someone in finance. When he hung up, he said, the company has an emergency assistance fund for employees in hardship situations. It's not widely advertised, but it exists. You qualify. He met my eyes. It's not a loan, and it's not charity, too. It's a fund that exists precisely for situations like this. If you want to repay it later, there's a framework for that, too. I sat in the chair across from him and felt, for the first time in weeks, something loosen in my chest. Not gone, nothing was solved yet, but loosened. Like a door that had been stuck finally moving on its hinges. Why are you helping me? I asked quietly. He looked at me steadily. You're my employee. It's my job to ensure my employees aren't in crisis. That's the official answer, I replied slowly. What's the actual one? His expression softened, but it was gone so quickly that I almost missed it. Because you asked for help, he said slowly. You walked in and told me the facts and what you needed, and you even offered to make it right. That is, he paused, not nothing, to me. I nodded slowly. Thank you, sir, I said. I mean that. My pleasure, he nodded. It's my job to make sure my employees are okay. I stood to leave. Miss Benson, he called, making me stop in my tracks. Next week there's a team dinner, more like a client event, strategy division. I'd like you to present the supplier analysis findings. Your section. That's a presentation opportunity, I said gleefully, not just an attendance. Yes, he replied, it is. I held his gaze for a moment. I'll be ready. I trust you, he said, and went back to his screen, indicating without a word that he was done with our conversation. Then I turned and left. When I got into the elevator, I pressed my back against the wall and took a deep breath. I couldn't help but start thinking how nobody in my life had ever said I trust you, and made it sound like the most certain thing in the world. Darius's surgery was scheduled and confirmed 2 weeks later. My mother called me crying happy tears that she tried to disguise because she didn't want me to know she'd been scared, and I let her think the disguise was working because sometimes you love people by letting them keep their dignity. I also cried, alone in my apartment bathroom at midnight, with the shower running so Destiny wouldn't hear, just for about 4 minutes. Then I washed my face and went to bed. Life at Shin Group had settled into a rhythm that I liked more than I'd expected. The work was challenging in the right way, complicated problems with real stakes, the kind of thing that made me forget to watch the clock. Manager Yoon and I had developed a functional working relationship built on mutual respect and the shared understanding that we both preferred precision to sentiment. The other analysts were sharp and competitive in a way I respected. Nobody gave anything for free, but nobody sabotaged either. Yi Shin's presence in my professional life was a controlled variable. That's how I thought about it. He ran the company. He appeared in meetings and occasional corridors. We communicated occasionally by text about work matters. He was my employer's employer. This was normal. This was fine. The problem was that he kept doing small things. He sent me a paper, an actual physical academic paper, not a digital link, about emerging market analysis methodologies, with a note in his handwriting that said simply, "Section 3 might interest you." From JS. Section 3 did interest me. Very much. I even read it twice. He stopped by the analyst floor once when I was working late and left a cup of coffee from the cafe downstairs on my desk without saying anything. And when I looked up, he was already walking away. And when I texted, "You didn't have to do that," he replied, "I know, but I just wanted to do it." I smiled and texted nothing else. He remembered, once in a meeting, that I'd mentioned in passing that a particular supplier's contract terms reminded me of a case study I'd written in 3rd year. And he asked about it, specifically, like he was interested, and I found myself talking about it for 12 minutes in a way I hadn't talked about my own academic work to anyone in months. They were small things, each one individually negligible. But together they were building something special, and I was smart enough to notice it and somehow still unable to stop the special way each of his actions made me feel. Destiny noticed everything, one night at dinner. She sat across from me with her chopsticks halfway to her mouth, watching me intently. Then she said, "You're thinking about Yi Shin." "I am not." "You usually have this look," she said. "Like you're calculating something, but the math keeps coming out in a way you don't trust." I slowly put my chopsticks down. "He's my boss," I said. "And I don't know anything about him. Not really. I know just the professional part, that's all." "Well, I think you should find out more." "It's not that easy," I stuttered. "It's kind of complicated." "Carly?" Destiny was looking at me with the particular patient expression she reserved only for occasions when she thinks I'm acting crazy. "You have been in Seoul for 3 years, and in that time you've had exactly one situationship that you ended because, and I'm quoting you, it felt like reading a book I'd already finished. You work constantly. You send money home. You have excellent grades. You do all the things and none of the things that would make your life feel like yours." She pointed a chopstick at me. "He notices you, and from what I can see, you notice him too, even though you always deny it. I'm not saying you should go ahead and fall in love with your CEO. That's a whole HR scandal waiting to happen. I'm saying stop deciding in advance that something can't be anything before it's had a chance to even be." I looked down at my food, picking my plate as I gathered my thoughts. "You know, he's from a completely different world," I said. "Like that huge, luxurious penthouse he owned, his family, everything about him. You grew up in Atlanta with a single mom, and you're sitting here with a scholarship and a career at one of Korea's top companies." Destiny rolled her eyes, cutting me short. "Sweetheart, you are from a different world than most people, too. And your background doesn't disqualify you, it's just who you are. And there's nothing you can do about it, girl. So stop beating yourself over what you can't even control." I didn't have a good response to that, so I kept quiet. The truth was that, deep down, I knew she was right. I'd known it and tucked it away in a small, very locked room in the back of my mind since the night when I sat beside him in his car. I was afraid of what was developing between us, which was unusual for me because I'm not a person who leads with fear. I'd been afraid of exactly one other thing in my adult life, that I'd work as hard as I was capable of working and it still wouldn't be enough, that the gap between what I could do and what my family needed would never fully close. And that fear, I'd learned to control it and channel my energy to focusing on the work in front of me at all times. This was different. This was a fear that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the terrifying possibility of wanting something with someone I shouldn't even dare. Which, in a way, was exactly what he described in that first lecture. High risk, high upside. The kind of bet where the volatility is visible and you can price it or you can run from it. I decided that I was not going to run from this. But I also wasn't going to do anything impulsive or stupid. I was going to be strategic and then mind my business. That's all. Unfortunately, I had not accounted for the fact that Yi Xin can also be strategic, and he was significantly better resourced than me. Wait, are you still here? Because if you are my kind of person. The story is about to take a crazy turn, and you don't want to miss it. Real quick, though, which position are you right now? Are you team phone in bed, laptop at work, living room TV? Also, where in the world are you watching this story from right now? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's proceed. The client dinner was a Saturday evening event at a restaurant in Itaewon that was exactly as intimidating as its reputation suggested. The kind of place where the menu didn't have prices, which is a design choice for their target audience, because apparently it's only the elites or someone that has gone crazy that would dare to eat meals without asking about the price tags. I wore a modest beaded gold dress that I've always owned, and my braids were styled into an elegant updo by Destiny, who spent 40 minutes helping me dress up, which transformed my looks incredibly more than I even expected. I almost protested that we were doing too much, but she couldn't hear a thing of it. I wore my gold hoops, applied light makeup that enhanced my natural looks. The end result made me look like someone who belonged in a room like the event I was going to attend, which was the point after all, since half of professional life is the visual impression you make when you enter a room, before you've even said a word. The strategy division team was there, plus 4 high-end clients, plus Yi Xin, plus a woman I didn't know who arrived on the arm of one of the senior directors who I later found out was her father, and she immediately started trying hard to make her presence noticed. People noticed her anyway. Her name, I found out, was Suah, and she was the daughter of one of the Xin Group's most important board members, and she and Yi Xin had known each other since childhood, and she was, I'm going to be neutral about this, very beautiful in a way that made people pause to notice her, including me. She also, within about 15 minutes, had positioned herself at Yi Xin's elbow with the ease of an old friend, and she laughed at things he said in a way that was a bit louder than whatever he said warranted. I focused my attention on the clients. I presented my section of the supplier analysis and answered questions confidently, and got a very impressive comment from the most senior client in the room, who was 70 years old, and I heard that he doesn't usually give out compliments as a social courtesy. If he said my presentation was impressive, then he meant it. I was talking to Manager Yoon after dinner, doing the professional wind down, when I felt someone appear at my shoulder. Miss Benson. I turned, and it was Yi Xin. Suah was standing a few feet away, talking to someone else, but she was watching us with the peripheral attention of someone who has trained themselves not to look directly at the things they're watching. You did very well tonight, he said, low enough that it was just for me. Thank you, I replied calmly, ignoring the thumping in my chest. The clients were engaged, that helps. You made them engaged, he said. There's a good difference. I smiled, but careful not too much. You're right, thanks for the opportunity. He stared at me for a moment, taking me in, like he was mentally filing away some details about me in his head, his expression softening. Suah would like to meet you, he said then. His tone was entirely neutral, but there was something in the set of his shoulders that meant there was more to what he was saying. Sure, I said easily. I'd be happy to. He brought me over. Suah turned to me with a smile that was professionally warm, but I could see that she was quietly appraising me. Then she said, So you're the analyst everyone is talking about. Yi Xin mentioned you. Did he? I said, trying to act like I didn't know what she was doing. He said you found a liability clause that saved the company significant expense. She tilted her head slowly. That's impressive, especially for someone so new like you. I had a good foundation, I replied, and 3 days of uninterrupted reading. She laughed, softly, and somehow it sounded genuine. I like you already, she said. I see you're direct, and that's refreshing. Most people in these rooms aren't. Well, I think most people in these rooms are trying to manage multiple agendas at once, I said warmly, leaning towards her. I've only got one. And what's that? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Doing my work well, I said slowly. She held my gaze for a moment, and I could sense her respect for me growing. He talks about your work, she said, and it came out differently from the sentence before it. Quieter. He doesn't talk about people's work. Usually, he just assesses it and moves on. He's talked about yours 3 times, and that's more than he'd ever spoken about anyone's work that I know of. I didn't look at Yi Xin. It was a real struggle not to find his eyes. Instead, I kept my eyes on hers, even though I knew he was watching. You know, we grew up together, she said, as if answering a question I hadn't asked. He and I, our families expected well. They expected a lot of things that didn't happen. It's not. She stopped, catching her breath. I just wanted to say, he's not easy to know, but I think he's trying to let you know him, which is different from what he usually does. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said, thank you for telling me. She smiled warmly and whispered, don't thank me, just be honest with him. He doesn't get a lot of that. On the way out, Yi Xin walked beside me through the restaurant's entrance toward the street and said very quietly, what did she say to you? Nothing you need to worry about, I murmured. He was quiet for a moment, then he said quietly, Sua has opinions. Most interesting people do, I replied. She's perceptive, you should value that. He slowly stared at me sideways. Are you advocating for her? I only stated my little observation, I said, and that's a difference. His eyes twinkled with laughter, and the corner of his mouth curved into a smug smile that made him more handsome than usual. Then he looked at me and said warmly, you did that on purpose. A little, I admitted, smiling back at him. Feeling delicious warmth spread all over my body, down to my toes. His driver was there. He stopped at the car door and turned to look at me, and the Seoul night was cool and lit with the amber and white of the city, and his expression was softened in a way that I found adorable. Have dinner with me, he said. Not anything official or a work dinner, just dinner between us. I stopped and stared at him, my mind suddenly wiped blank. Nothing prepared me for this. There was no way I expected him to pop this on me out of the blues, just like that. You know, I stammered, unaware of what to say. You know dinner would make this complicated, I managed to say. I'm fully aware, he nodded, but I'm asking anyway. Why? Because you're the only person I've met in 5 years who rejected my money and argues with me as a first instinct, eventually finding a way to make it seem respectful, he said. And someone whenever you're in a room, I'm somehow aware of exactly where you are at all times, which is a habit I've picked up recently but haven't processed yet. I stared at him. Did you just describe attraction using technical language? He shrugged and said, I only tried to describe a consistent data point, but feel free to make of it whatever you want. I wanted to make so many things out of it. I told myself that I was going to be an adult about this. I was going to be careful, and I was going to take my time. Sunday, I eventually said. 7 o'clock, and you're not picking the restaurant. I will be the one to choose the location. He nodded, almost he had expected me to decline his offer, and was relieved that I didn't. That sounds like a perfect plan. And if you make one reference to my work output during dinner, I'm leaving. Understood, ma'am, he joked in mock surrender, the twinkle returning to his eyes. And I'm paying my half. That one made him go quiet immediately. Why? Because this isn't a transaction, I said. It's just dinner like you said earlier, between 2 adults with equal standing. So I think we should both share responsibilities. He stood there, staring at me for a long moment. Then he managed to say, equal standing, sharing responsibilities, he repeated, and there was something in his tone, something that sounded almost like he hadn't expected me to propose this, and it moved him, even though clearly he doesn't like it. All right, Miss Benson. Carlene, I said, if we're having dinner, you can use my name. Carlene, he said, with his rich baritone, and somehow my name sounded different in his voice, than it did in anyone else's. I turned and walked to the subway before I said anything else that I'd overthink later. Or worse, let him drag me into his car again. I chose a small Korean fusion restaurant in Hongdae that I'd been going to since my first year in Seoul. It was nothing like the luxurious places he probably ate. There were 20 seats, handwritten menu board, a chef who came out of the kitchen at the end of the night to ask how everything was because he actually wanted to know. As usual, the food was extraordinary, which was why I loved coming here. The ambience was warm and slightly noisy, but there wasn't any pretense anywhere. Just normal people enjoying a good meal. I arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. He was already there, which surprised me. I'd half expected him to be late in the manner of people who are always the most important person in the room, and have learned that people usually waits for them. But he was at the table. I'd booked and sent him the number earlier. He had his jacket on, no phone in sight, and when I walked in he stood like a true gentleman, which made me develop a really soft spot for him in that instant. "You look," he started to say something, but I cut him short. "Don't say anything," I said, sitting slowly across from him, "or else I'm going to overthink it." He sat down. Overthink what? Whatever adjective you were about to use. I slowly picked up the menu. I've been told I receive compliments badly, although I'm working on it. "Well, I don't think that you receive them badly," he said. "Maybe you tend to get suspicious with compliments or sweet words. Those are different things." I lowered the menu slightly. "Have you been cataloging my behavioral patterns?" "I just observe things," he shrugged, with a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's just one of my many habits." "I see." I nodded slowly and went back to the menu. "So tell, what do you observe?" He paused, checking the weight of his words. "I think you carry a huge weight that doesn't show on the surface. You shield yourself so much and make yourself hard to read. I've noticed it's deliberate, and you have a way of doing it so consistently that most people stop trying." He tilted his head slightly, meeting my eyes, but I didn't. I put the menu down and looked at him. "Why didn't you stop trying?" "Because I find the effort you've invested in shielding yourself very fascinating, and experience has taught me that such a trait is usually evidence of significant depth." He nodded slowly, with a smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "And significant depth is the only thing I find interesting." I looked at him for a long moment. "Yi Shin." "Yes." "I can see that you're going to be a handful." I murmured my intrusive thoughts. "God help me." The smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips widened into a warm smile like I had handed him a lottery. His eyes twinkling with humor, transforming his entire face, making him devastatingly handsome that I had to suck in my breath, in a very weak attempt to gain composure. "I have been told worse. I'm surprised this is all you could come up with." He finished, flashing me another of those smiles that usually knocks air out of my lungs. We ordered. The food came and was as good as I knew it would be, and somewhere in the first course our guards dropped. We stopped being careful around each other and started actually talking like good friends. And Lord knows, we talked a lot about his company. He didn't dwell too much on the business part of running the company. Rather, he talked from his heart and told me the reason behind his drive, why he'd built his empire and the parts of it that kept him at his desk past 10 o'clock, even on a Friday night. He confided in me like I was his longtime friend. I even asked him questions carefully, not sure how he'd receive it, but he answered them with a directness that told me he'd made some kind of peace with being honest all the time. He even told me about his father, and the friction between them, and how it's difficult to love someone you don't know how to speak to. I didn't even know when I opened up and told him about Darius, how my life was like in Atlanta. I even talked about my mother's way of shielding her worries in a determined way that she'd rather swallow bullets than show, and how I've learnt to understand what she's trying so hard not to show. I also told him about my ex, Chris, and then I laughed about how that relationship had left me a bit traumatized whenever the name Chris is mentioned. But he didn't laugh back. Instead, his expression softened when he asked me, "Seems you are not really angry about it anymore. Most people carry anger after their relationship ends, and this hinders their healing process." "Actually, I was angry for a while," I confessed, flashing back at some of the memories. "Then I decided the energy was better used elsewhere. I'm a pragmatist." He looked at me for a long time and said quietly, "That's refreshing, to see someone who's intentional about letting go instead of nursing a grudge." I didn't know how to react to his words. I was so lost that I started stuttering. That's quite a lot of analysis for someone else's past relationship. "I was told to be honest with you," he said, maintaining eye contact. I sat up. "Who was that?" I asked curiously. "Suah did," he said matter-of-factly, pausing to bring out his phone. "She texted me before tonight saying, be honest with her, she can handle it." I watched him literally read out the text, and I couldn't stop the laughter bubbling inside me. It started somewhere in my chest and spilled before I could control it, and he smiled back at me, looking pleased with my reaction. "She really did say that," I said, amidst bouts of laughter. "Yes, ma'am," he nodded, his eyes still twinkling with humor. "She also called me to say, don't use your work voice. Make sure to use your normal voice." He paused and playfully cleared his throat. "I hope I'm using my real voice in case you decide to report me." I laughed again. This time my laughter lasted longer. "You've been on good behavior tonight, and I don't plan to report you." The chef came out at the end of the night, exactly as he always did, to ask how everything had been. I spoke to him in Korean, which made him light up the way people do when they notice for the first time that an African-American lady like myself can speak Korean. He smiled brightly when I told him that the braised short rib had been better than last time. To spice things up, I went ahead to say that the person I'd brought tonight had cleaned his entire plate. Yi Shin's cheek flushed and he mouthed, "Nice one." The chef laughed and shook his hand, then disappeared back into the kitchen. When we were left alone, Yi Shin looked at me and asked, "You come here often?" "Whenever I can afford to," I nodded, "which isn't as often as I'd like, but it's always worth it." He glanced around the restaurant. I could see his genius brain taking note of the 20 seats, the handwritten menu, the walls with their old photographs. "I haven't been to a restaurant like this," he said quietly. "Feels good to try something new." "I'm happy to give you the experience." I tried to tear him and he smiled. When the bill came, I insisted on splitting the bill, and he was wise enough to not make a fuss about it, even though I could see he hated it from the way his jaw twitched when I paid my part. After the dinner, he walked with me to the subway entrance, because I'd mentioned once that I liked the walk and he'd remembered. "Thanks," I breathed. "I had a good time." "Me too," he murmured, standing beside me. "I'd do it again," I said, looking up at him, because if I was done trying to be reserved. His expression softened. Without a word, he gently reached out and tucked one loose braid back from my face. The brush of his fingertips on my face felt like a soft caress. I almost let out a soft moan. Thank goodness for home training. "I would love to do this again," he said quietly, watching me intently like he was storing up details about me in his brain. I managed to pull away from the aura around him that keeps making me wish to stand there with him forever. We said our goodbyes, and I went down the subway steps before I did something I'm not proud of. I couldn't stop thinking about him all through the ride home. I replayed that part where he tucked in my braids almost 1,000 times that my brain went into an overdrive. I had no idea how I managed to get home in one piece that night. With the way I was going, I half expected to be rushed into hospital due to irregular heart palpitations. 3 weeks after the dinner, I discovered that the universe had not exhausted its enthusiasm for testing me. Yi Shin and I had formed a connection, although neither of us had named it, which was partly my refusal to say anything whenever he brings it up. So far, we've had 2 more lovely dinners. We also met on a Saturday afternoon at a market in Bukshan, where he'd been charmingly out of his depth among street vendors, and I'd been uselessly pleased about it. Also, we've been texting each other constantly. It all started as a work text, but now it's something else. Sometimes we text way past midnight, talking about little things like our fond childhood memories, something funny that happened during the day, or even how our day went. We would go on and on with those texts that before we realize it, it's been 3 hours of constant back-to-back text. It wasn't easy getting used to talking to him this way, with him being my boss and everything. The way he was intentional about communicating with me and making sure I was okay, gradually pulled me out of my shell. I thought we had everything under control, and no one in the company knew. Well, that was until I walked into the break room one morning and heard two colleagues I didn't know well whispering on the other side of the partition. I've seen them together twice now outside the office. I'm talking about our CEO and that American analyst, a female voice said. Seriously? Another female voice with a lighter tone replied curiously, clearly interested in this latest gossip. I've seen her getting out of his car, and I'm sure other people have seen them too. And apparently she's been receiving special treatment from the company too. Can you imagine that she got a hardship fund approval, even a fast-tracked contract presentation, within just a few weeks of working here? Oh my gosh, the second female replied. You think she's his? I never said anything like that to you. The first female cut her short. I'm just saying it's suspicious. She's been here less than 2 months and she's already allowed to present to senior clients and get access to executive projects. Come on, do the math like someone with a functional brain. Something fishy must be going on between them, and I intend to find out. I froze on my side of the partition, my heart thumping wildly in my chest. I could almost hear the sound of my erratic heartbeats. What if you're mistaken? I heard she's clearly talented and very good at her job. The second female spoke up. Someone hissed, and then I heard the first female's voice. Everyone's talented when they're sleeping with the CEO. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out of the break room without getting my coffee, went to my desk, sat down, opened my laptop, and forced myself to focus on work. Breathe, I tried to tell myself. You're not stupid, so when you started saying yes to those dinners with him and spending more time with him, you knew deep down that this was going to happen someday, and that someday is today. You cannot control what people say. You can only control what you do. But I must admit hearing the way they spoke about me hurts. It hurts like crazy. And the fact that I haven't even kissed him yet, or even spent a steamy night with him. Not like I haven't fantasized about that yet, but hearing other people talk about my business without the facts makes it even more unbearable. I hate to say this, because this was the part that kept nagging at me. The truth is that somehow I understood their logic, judging everything from the outside without internal information. I was the new analyst, and within a few weeks of work, I was already getting opportunities with high-profile projects, spending time with the CEO. It definitely would look suspicious to anyone who is naturally nosy. By lunchtime, the story had apparently spread like wildfire around the company's numerous gossip channels that I definitely wasn't part of. I could sense the bad energy in the air, especially with the countless weird glances that members of the staff threw my way when they thought that I wasn't looking. Destiny texted me that instant, Carly. There's this gossip about you that's circulating, but ignore it. I read it, wondering how she already knew. Before I could even type to reply, my phone buzzed again. It was still Destiny. OMG. I just heard that my uncle is not pleased with this new gossip going around. He may or may not have canceled 3 meetings this morning because of this. Okay, for a bit of context here. Destiny's uncle was Yi Shin's chief of staff. I had no idea until I met Destiny talking to him one day. And that bit of knowledge made me sit with my head in my hands for a full 5 minutes. When I asked Destiny why she didn't bother to tell me, she said she thought she had mentioned it to me and was sorry for skipping that part. That afternoon, I was working through a market analysis report with my headphones in. That's my own version of I am fine. Do not approach me unless it is an emergency. When I felt this sudden shift in the atmosphere that I had come to associate with Yi Shin's presence, whenever he's around me. I immediately took one headphone out, then I glanced up and spotted him. He was standing right here in the analyst floor, but not at my desk, not in anyone's office space in particular, and there was this posture he had that was clear he wasn't interested to speak with anyone. Even though everyone on my team was suddenly scurrying around trying to look like they are very focused on work, so as to leave a good impression on him. He ignored them all, then caught my eye and tilted his head toward the conference room at the end of the hall. I quickly saved my document and followed him. The conference room was empty by that time of the day. When we got there, he turned and bolted the door, locking us in. Then he turned to me and went straight to the point. I'm aware of what's being said about us. My cheek flushed with the humiliation I had been forced to endure the past few hours. "I'm sorry you have to experience this," he breathed. I raised my eyes to look at him. My heart skipped a beat the moment our eyes met. Somehow I could sense that he was sincere with his words. He was truly remorseful about the whole situation. But remorse wasn't what I wanted from him. Not this time. "It's not your fault," I stuttered, blinking back the tears that were starting to form. I'm usually a strong girl, and I had been dealing with this entire situation all day with grace. Why the heck am I fumbling before this man and tearing up like I was a toddler whose favorite toy just got broken? "I take responsibility for everything," he continued, making my emotional state much worse. I shook my head. I couldn't bear it that he wanted to take the blame for what we both did. I understand that people are going to talk about us, and we can't control what people think of us. I blinked hard, trying hard to push back those annoying tears. "I'm not panicking, I'm just annoyed. There's a huge difference." He held my gaze. "It's my responsibility to protect you. I do not wish for you to go through this on your own." "I can take care of myself." I shook my head. "You do not need to worry because we haven't done anything inappropriate. There's nothing to be ashamed of. These rumors will die off in no time." "Carlene," he called my name in a way that made my insides melt like jelly. "I will not allow your reputation to be damaged because you're associating with me. I want to make that clear." "What are you going to do about it because it's already happening?" I asked him, curious to know his plans. "Do you wish to end whatever this is?" I was tired of playing around with words. In my head, I was already thinking way ahead. All I could think of was that if he wanted to end it, he might as well just do it now. So I could deal with both situations at the same time and heal faster. I mentally braced myself up, expecting the inevitable. "No," his voice boomed, crushing the walls I was already mentally erecting. "Listen to me, nobody will make me end what's going on with us. Never." He reached out to hold my hands while looking into my eyes. "I will deal with the rumors. I also want to let you know that I spoke to HR this morning. Your contract presentation, your supplier analysis, the liability clause, all of your work will be formally documented as an independent work product with time-stamped records under your name. It's standard, but I want it explicit. I will not let your work be dismissed or erased." This wasn't what I was expecting, but it was such a huge relief to hear this. At least, it will prove that I'm not the dumb hire who's sleeping with the boss, like those women painted me this morning. "You're trying to protect my work," I asked, dumbfounded, even though it was clear. "Your work is excellent," he nodded. "I like to think that excellent work should be protected, and that's not preferential treatment." "Thank you," I didn't know what else to say. His expression softened. "Also," he continued, clearly not yet done with whatever he had to say, "I'd like to take you to my family's dinner next week. My parents and my sister are." "You're what?" I asked immediately, clearly caught off guard. My eyes widened in shock and surprise. Then I broke out in a cold sweat. "My mother has been asking about you consistently, since my sister mentioned to her that I'd been seen looking at someone in a way that she described as..." He paused, watching my face as if he was choosing his words carefully, Yi-Shin-like. I pressed my lips together so I wouldn't smile. "You mean, your sister told your mother that you looked at me weirdly?" "If you choose to call it that, yes." He nodded, clearly feeling shy. "And your solution is to bring me to your family dinner." "My solution is to be honest about us," he said, "rather than let others make up rumors about what they clearly don't know." His voice softened as he looked at me in an adorable way. "I don't want to let other people's opinion control what happens between us. That's why I want you to meet my family." I stood there in the conference room, tongue-tied and lost in his eyes, that I had no idea that I had taken too long to reply, and he was starting to wonder if I would say no. "Okay," I finally say. "I will be honored to attend your family dinner." His expression immediately lit up, like he had half expected me to refuse, and was truly relieved I hadn't turned his request down. "I will pick you up on Sunday." "Sounds perfect," I agreed, flashing him a shy smile. "And I'm going to wear whatever I want." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said, returning my smile. Then he winked and said, By the way, you look stunning in every outfit. I wore an elegant evening dress, with my braids half up, gold jewelry, and heels that made me look elegant like I was a supermodel. The boys in my neighborhood back in Atlanta had always told me countless times since I hit puberty that I was beautiful, but I never paid attention to those words, because I was raised to believe that boys would be boys. I made sure not to create room for them to use me as their plaything. The Shin family home was in a residential neighborhood that was very quiet in the way of places where old money resides. Funny how I was freaking out, because I'd almost expected a gigantic gate, probably guards, and an impression of stepping into a fortress. Thankfully, what I got was a house that was large and beautiful, and when we walked through the front door, the aroma of good food hit me, and then I heard the melodious sound of someone laughing in a back room. His mother came to welcome us in the hallway, and she was the kind of woman who makes you feel at peace at the first glance. She was a lovely Korean woman, stylish and had Yi Shin's intelligent eyes. She smiled the moment she spotted me and spread her arms, inviting me to a warm embrace. "Carlene," she called my name excitedly, like she'd known me before. Nothing prepared me for this, and I almost took off for my life. My feet moved before my brain could process what's happening, and in a split second, I was wrapped up in a warm hug under her arms, breathing in her expensive but sweet-smelling perfume. She pulled back and held my cheeks affectionately. "I've heard so little about you. He wouldn't bulge no matter how much I try to get information about you from him. And do you know what that means?" She smiled at me again, standing up close to her. This time I could see her perfect dentition. I shook my head, not trusting my vocal cords to make any sound. "It means that you must be very special to him. My Yi doesn't gatekeep unless he wants something or someone all to himself, and I can see clearly that he's got good taste." This time she laughed softly, patted my shoulder affectionately, and slowly let me go. Then she moved towards Yi Shin. He leaned in because he was way taller than her, and she kissed his cheeks in a bid to welcome him. I watched their interaction warmly from where I stood. "Come in," she said, waving us all inside the big house. His sister Jaisu, who moved through the world with the force and joy of someone who had decided that life was meant to be experienced at full volume, immediately appeared from the hallway and looked at me with an unguarded delight of someone who had been waiting for this for a while. "Oh my gosh," she screamed. "Oh, those braids. I want to know everything about your braids." "Jaisu," Yi Shin called her name, trying to get her to behave, but she ignored him and focused on me instead. I couldn't help but laugh a bit in my mind. No one back at the office would believe that there was someone capable of disobeying our CEO and nothing happened. "I'm serious, that's honey brown, right? Is that all natural color?" She was already beside me. "I'm Jaisu. I'm the better Shin sibling. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "She's not wrong," his mother added with a wink, although sometimes she can be a handful. "I'm starting to like this family," I said with a wide smile. Yi Shin's father was in the living room, and when we walked in, he stood to welcome us. He was tall. Yi Shin had his height. Within seconds in this house, I could sense that there was love in this family. It was there in their warm smiles, their free spirits, and the way they welcomed me, someone they've never met before, without any friction that most elite families usually display. "Miss Benson," he said, "I hear you're working at the Shin Group." "Yes, sir," I nodded respectfully. "I work in the strategy division. And I've been there about 2 months." "And before that?" he asked with a raised brow. "I am a student at Yonsei. I got in under an academic scholarship. I will be graduating in March." He nodded slowly. "Where do your family stay?" "I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. My family stays there. I had to come to Korea because of school." "Looks like you're a long way from home," he replied, deep in thought. "You're absolutely right, sir," I said simply. "But I love Korea. There is something about this place that makes it feel like my second home." He paused to look at me, and I had a feeling that I'd just said the right thing. "Come sit down here." He pointed to a space near him. I glanced at Yi Shin. He nodded, silently giving me a go-ahead. Then I went and sat down next to his father. Dinner was genuinely wonderful. His mother cooked with the energy of someone who considers feeding her family as a form of love language, and Jaisu talked enough for 3 people. Yi Xin's father kept asking me questions. We ended up having an honest conversation about markets and international business, and he didn't dismiss my opinion one bit. Instead, he complimented some of them. I asked him about the company's early years, and he told me, with a pride he didn't try to conceal, and I listened with real interest, which left him really impressed. He said it was rare to see someone my age with such a brilliant mind. I smiled and said nothing. After dinner, Yi Xin and his father stepped outside. I watched them from the window while Jaisu showed me photos on her phone. From the corner of my eyes, I could see the two men discussing. They had a focused expression and a posture that looked like they were both engrossed in a very important conversation. "They fight sometimes," Jaisu said beside me, without looking up from her phone. "They've always fought, but lately they've been less defensive around each other. I have a theory that it might be because my brother has finally met a girl he really likes, and that's you." "I haven't done anything," I said. "You made him less edgy," she said, watching me. "That sounds simple, but it's not. Yi Xin doesn't let people in. He never has. He'll give them everything, the company, the resource, the solution to their problems, but not the actual him. He didn't even let the women he dated in the past get this close to him." She glanced at me sideways. "But my brother lets you see the actual him." I avoided meeting her eyes. Instead, I directed my gaze through the window, watching father and son as they talk in the luxurious, quiet garden. "Jaisu," I said carefully, "the situation between your brother and I, it's complicated. I'm just his employee, nothing more." She said, deep in thought. "But you also won't let him be your employer when it's not working hours. I've heard about the dinner where you insisted on splitting the bill. Mom thought that was very funny and also thoughtful. Shows you are not after his money." She put her phone down. "Listen, he's not going to misuse his position as your boss or force you to do what you wouldn't want to do. He's too principled for that, which is one of his most annoying qualities. He'll find a way to make what you both have to be structurally right. He always does." She looked at me. "The question is whether you'll let him." I stared at her. I didn't know what to say with the truckload of information she just dumped on me. "I think you already know the answer." She finished and picked her phone, suddenly engrossed in whatever took her attention. Yi Xin and his father came back inside. His father looked at me when they re-entered the room and said, "My son tells me you have strong opinions about strategic partnerships." "I've been told that I have opinions about most things," I said. "Strong ones." "Good," he said, and sat down and reached for his tea, and somehow I could sense that the energy in the room felt lighter than it had before, even though it hadn't been bad earlier. "We need more strong opinions in this family," he murmured and took a sip from his teacup. "Dad," Jaisu said, "but I literally always have opinions too." "Opinions, my dear," he said patiently, "not special announcements." Jaisu playfully made a funny face, and everyone at the table laughed. I laughed too, enjoying myself. Yi Xin, sitting beside me, turned to look at me with an adorable expression. Our eyes met, and I felt warm, fuzzy butterflies flutter in my belly. From the corner of my eyes, I could see his mom watching us with a pleased expression. Then she leaned towards Yi Xin's father to whisper something that I wasn't sure I caught, but it sounded like, "Our son finally found his special girl." Here is a true thing about feelings. They do not organize themselves around your schedule. You can be a planner, a spreadsheet maker, a person who reads footnotes and finds liability clauses in 48 hours, but still find yourself completely unprepared when that special moment finally comes. It happened on a Friday night. I was in the office working late as usual. I was trying to finish a proposal that had a deadline the next morning. The floor had emptied around me, and the city lights were doing their thing outside the windows, and I was on my second coffee and approximately 70% done, which meant I would make it if I focused and did not get distracted. And then Yi Xin appeared in the doorway, his white shirt half unbuttoned, his sleeve rolled in a way that showed his well-sculpted forearms. His expression looked like he'd been busy too, but had to come check up on me. "You should eat," he said, quietly, watching me as I tried to type on the laptop. "I have coffee," I replied. "You know, that's not food." "It's liquid, but it's close enough." He crossed the floor in that instant and set a container of food on my desk. I immediately knew that the food was from the cafe on the third floor that closed at 9, which meant he'd ordered it before 9, and he'd personally brought it to me. Like he'd been intentional about feeding me and thought about it in advance. I couldn't help my lips forming an O in surprise as I looked at the container. "You ordered dinner for me?" I asked, still surprised. "You usually forget to eat whenever you're working," he said. "Someone had to make sure that you don't waste away, since it's a recurring pattern." "How did you know that I skip meals sometimes? You've been tracking what I eat." "You skip meals most times. Stop covering it up. And yes, I've been observing you closely because you're my employee. Nothing bad with that." I giggled. He raised his eyebrow at me, clearly not expecting me to find humor in the situation. "That's your work voice," I managed to say amidst giggles. "You're using your work voice on me." His expression immediately softened, and the work voice went away. In its place was a voice that was raw with unspoken emotions, and it was barely above a whisper, but I could hear him clearly because he was standing mere inches away from me. "I ordered dinner for you," he said, in that voice that was driving me insane, "because I couldn't stop thinking about you all day." I summoned the courage and slowly turned in my chair to face him properly. "What did you think about?" I asked. "I heard you when you called your brother, Darius, yesterday," he said. "I happened to be coming in when you were standing at the stairs, and I saw your face after that call. It had this." He stopped. "You seem happy with the surgery update. You were so happy that it made you look heavenly. I couldn't help but start thinking of how I can make you that happy too." My throat immediately went dry. "He's recovering well," I managed to say, choosing to not talk about his other words. "They finally moved him out of the ICU. He texted me this morning with 7 cry-laughing emojis and a request that I send him huge American snacks, which I'm choosing to interpret as a full recovery." "That's great news," he whispered, his expression looking genuinely pleased, like my brother's recovery really mattered to him. "Yishin," I said. "Yes, Carlene." He leaned towards me, his lips barely a few inches away from mine. I swallowed hard and closed my eyes briefly. "I need to say something. Please don't find it weird. I will understand if you're not interested." He raised one eyebrow slightly and whispered, "Go on, I'm listening." "I think I like you," I said. And that's it. I finally let my feelings out, and unfortunately I couldn't take those words back. Too late. Might as well finish it. The only option was to wait for his response. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever, and I almost had a mental breakdown. Then he gently cupped my face, his thumb rubbing my lower lip in slow, soft caress. "I've been thinking about how to tell you about my feelings for you for 6 weeks now. I have written 4 different versions. Asking you to be my girl. None of them were right because none of them could say the actual thing, the way I wanted it said." "What's the actual thing?" I asked breathlessly, basking in the wave of desire his thumb was sending down my entire body. "The actual thing," he said, "is that you are the most honest person I have ever met. You are honest even when it costs you, which is unusual. You're brilliant, which is not unusual for someone that's working at this company, but your particular kind of brilliance, the way you see structure in things that look like chaos, is rare. You carry weight without making it other people's problem, which I understand deeply. And you make me want to be a less defended version of myself." He paused. "That is not a small thing for me. I don't know how you managed to do all that, but it's not small." I looked at him. "You mean you wrote 4 versions of all these?" I asked curiously. "Yes," he nodded, his eyes focused entirely on me. "Did any of them start with market analysis metaphors?" "The first one, yes." He smiled, getting the joke I was throwing at him. "I would have liked to see that one," I said. "I deleted it immediately," he said, "because I knew what you'd say." "You shouldn't always jump to conclusions." "Carlene," he called my name. "Yes," I paused, answering immediately. "Can I kiss you?" I nodded, too lost in the moment to say a word. His lips immediately crashed into mine, taking as much as I could give. He let his feelings for me pour out from the possessive way his mouth took me. I melted in his arms, moaning his name as his hands reached down to grab my waist and pin me right there in position. I wanted nothing more but to let this moment last forever. Breathless, We managed to pull apart from each other, even though we both wanted to go on and on. "Let me take you home." His voice came out laced with arousal. I quickly shut down my laptop and followed him out. We left the office together. The Seoul night was cool and lit. He kept holding my hand throughout our walk towards his car, like he wasn't going to ever let me go. Okay, so I want to be very clear. Things went well. Beautifully well, actually, for about 3 weeks after that office moment. We were careful about the work separation. He involved HR in structuring our arrangement so that my performance evaluations were handled by an independent team rather than through his chain, to avoid my work getting dismissed or messed up by the wrong hands. I don't know exactly what he did, but somehow those rumors disappeared like they never happened, although I kept looking out for those 2 women I heard whispering about my business. A bouquet of scented roses got delivered to my desk, and the written note there stated, "This is for the market analysis metaphors you requested." I laughed when I read it, and deep down I knew my teammates must be wondering if I've officially lost my mind. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Yishin. "Do you like those analysis?" I smiled and texted back, "Has anyone ever told you that you're romantic in an unusual way?" "My sister uses an entirely less complimentary language," he replied, "but I'm glad you find me romantic." Our life was perfect until we had a problem. My Aunt Gloria had apparently been telling her friend Janet, the one in Seoul who'd organized the original blind date with Christopher, that Carlene was doing wonderfully and was seeing someone, and Janet had mentioned it to someone, and somehow the gist traveled Korean business social circle got to Yi Shin's father's desk in form of 2 informal phone calls, and also in the ears of a senior board member who had strong opinions about who's involved in the CEO's personal life. I found out about this piece of information because Yi Shin told me, directly, "We've both sworn that there will be no secrets between us if we really want to keep this real, and no matter what, to be always honest with each other." "The board member's concern," he continued, "is primarily about optics." "I know what the concern is," I replied, processing what I just heard. I was cuddling up with him in his apartment, and I was trying to remain calm about the entire situation. "I know they will be seeing me as the American analyst, a foreigner who got fast-track opportunities in the company. They would have expectations about the CEO's personal life and the company's image." "Yes," he nodded. "And what did you say?" "I said," he told me, with the absolute flatness of someone who has already had this conversation and is not going to have it again, "that my personal life is mine to determine. That Miss Benson's record at this company is independently verifiable and beyond reproach, and that any board member who attempts to use their position to influence my personal decisions will find that I have a very detailed memory for conflicts of interest." He paused, reaching out to pull me towards him. I said it more formally than that, but that was the message. I looked at him. "You didn't bother to ask me about my own opinion first." "No," he said, "but I'm telling you now because you deserve to know what was said and what I said in response. If you want to make different decisions based on this information, I will respect that." "What decisions would I make differently?" "You could decide," he said carefully, "that all these drama and complications that usually arise from being with me is not worth it. It would hurt deeply, but I will respect that." I looked at him. "Is that what you're hoping I'll decide?" "No," he said, without hesitation. "I hope you do not plan to get rid of me soon, because I'm not planning to go anywhere," he finished, holding on to me like I was oxygen. "Good," I said, "because I'm not going anyway either. We're in this together." I leaned in and kissed his forehead. "Are you for real? You're not breaking up with me ever?" he asked, with an expression that shows he was being serious. "We're in this together." He was quiet for a moment, just looking at me. Then he whispered, "You're all in." "I'm all in," I confirmed. The expression on his face was something I will forever treasure. His voice broke, with raw emotions in a way I had never seen him. In a split second, he allowed himself to appear so vulnerable that I fully understood how much he wanted me in his life, and how much he was trying not to mess things up between us. "I love you, babe," he breathed in my ear. "God knows I do." "I know you do," I reached out, trying to pull him into a tight hug, but he beat me to it. He was faster. Instead, his mouth crashed onto mine, kissing me hungrily like he'd been starving since forever. I returned his kisses, driving him crazy, that it felt amazing, the moment he moaned my name out loud. Carlene, oh my gosh, babe, I can't get enough of you. We made love all night right there in his apartment, and he left me aching in glorious places. Okay, we are nearly at the end of this story, and I genuinely need you to tell me something before we get to the last chapter. Are you still team phone in bed? Team laptop at work? Team living room TV? And most importantly, where in the world are you right now? I want to know if someone is watching this at 2 a.m., if someone in London is on their lunch break, if someone in Atlanta, Carlene's hometown, is eating a snack right now and enjoying the story. Drop it in the comments. I will personally reply to every single comment in the first hour. Hit that like button if you love this story. Hit subscribe if you want more, because there's more where this came from. Now, let's proceed. March arrived, and with it my graduation ceremony, which Yonsei University usually hosts with pride. I was selected as the student representative to give the graduation address, which I found out 3 weeks before from my department chair in an email that I read twice and then showed to Destiny, who screamed once and then made me promise to let her do my hair. She did my hair, full honey brown knotless braids, freshly redone down my back. I wore my graduation gown over a white dress, and it came out perfect. I also wore my gold hoops and my grandmother's bracelet that I usually wore on important days, because she was the first person who ever called me brilliant and meant it. When the moment for me to give my speech arrived, I stood there at the podium, looking at the 2,000 people, and couldn't help but think back about those tough moments I had endured over the last 3 years. Every late night, every worried phone call from home, and all those part-time jobs I had been forced to take, including cleaning service, where I had eventually met the love of my life. Taking a deep breath, I started speaking. We are standing at the edge of an achievement we've been building toward, I said, and most of us are terrified. I want to tell you that's normal and your fears are valid. Being terrified at the edge of something huge is an appropriate emotional response. What you do with the terror, whether you allow it to limit you or let it sharpen you, is your choice to make. Throughout our stay in this institution, we've been learning how to make choices here. We've been learning how to think about problems and come up with clean solutions. I paused, allowing my eyes to sweep through the crowd. We've also been learning, some of us, that the most honest thing you can do is show up as exactly what you are and trust that it's enough. That's the most important lesson. I'm still learning it. But I'm further along than I was before, and I hope you have the courage to extend the same grace to yourself. I got a standing ovation that made me a bit shy, and afterward in the courtyard, while families clustered and phones came out for photos, Destiny hugged me for a long time and said, "Your grandma would have cried." And I said, "She would have cried and then told me to stand up straight." And Destiny laughed, and everything felt just right. I was still talking with Destiny when I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the courtyard, in a dark coat. He wasn't dressed for a ceremony, which meant he'd either come directly from somewhere else, or had planned to be here, but in a low-key way that wouldn't attract unnecessary attention. Our eyes met. He was watching me in that adorable expression that made my insides melt. I immediately crossed the courtyard toward him. He met me halfway. "You came. You're supposed to be in a very important board meeting as we speak," I said, wondering why he ditched it. "Yes, but I came to hear you speak. The suspense was killing me. I couldn't stay put until I came here." He kissed my forehead, handing me a big bouquet of roses. "And your speech, it was spectacular." I smiled, breathing in the fragrance from the roses. "Also, I wanted to see you, babe. I wanted to be here for you. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else today except by your side." I held his gaze. "Thank you," I said, "for showing up for me." "You said something in your address," he said. "The most honest thing you can do is show up as exactly what you are and trust that it's enough. Tell me the truth. Were you talking to just your fellow graduates because I think you meant something else, or was I imagining things?" He teased me. I said what I said. "Feel free to process it the way you can." I giggled. Gosh, being with this man makes me so happy. He studied me for a moment, a smug smile pulling at the corner of his lips. "Babe," he called me in a way that left me wondering what he was up to. "Yes," I answered. "I love you, and every moment with you give me more reason to love you more. I can never get enough of you." I looked at him for a long time. The courtyard was full of families and photographs, and the small high noise of a day being celebrated, and he was standing there in the middle of it professing his love to me, not caring that a tabloid might take shots of us together and write nasty things about us. Epilogue, 6 months later. Darius flew to Seoul in September. He came off the plane with his carry-on bag and his headphones around his neck, and the particular energy of someone who has been through something hard and understands exactly what life feels like now because of the comparison. He was 20 years old and healthy. Actually, genuinely healthy. The scar on his chest was the only evidence of everything the last year had been. And he looked around Incheon Airport with the expression of someone arriving somewhere they'd been curious about their whole life. I was there to meet him, and beside me was Yi Shin, who had insisted on coming with me to the airport. Darius came through the arrivals gate, and the moment he spotted me, he immediately ran towards me, throwing his arms around me in the way he always has since he was 7. When we were done hugging each other and wiping each other's tears of joy, he stepped back and looked at Yi Shin. "Yo," Darius said, "you're the guy." "I'm the guy," Yi Shin agreed. "Mom said you're a CEO or something." "Something like that. She also said you returned Carly's umbrella, which," Darius looked at me, "I still think is low bar, sis. You settled just for an umbrella return." "I also," Yi Shin said, "love her with all my heart. I want to make her happy for the rest of my life, and I'm ready to take a bullet for her." I couldn't believe my ears, so I slapped his arm playfully, signaling him to stop saying rubbish. I had no idea that Darius bought that. He stood there processing it, then he shrugged. "Okay, I can work with that." We drove into Seoul with Darius in the back seat, asking increasingly detailed questions about Korean barbecue, and whether you could actually get good sneakers here, and whether the Han River at night was as cool as it looked on social media. Yi Shin was so patient that he answered every single question, like he was being very intentional about getting along with my brother. At one point, Darius leaned forward between the seats and said, "Okay, actual question. What do you love about my sister?" "Darius," I screamed. "Chill, sis," he replied. "I want to hear what he's got to say." Yi Shin was quiet for a moment, like he was gathering his thoughts. "I love your sister because she is the most fascinating person I've ever met in a really long time, and that's rare with most people in my circle. She is honest, says the truth even if it costs her something. She is brilliant. Her brain works like a powerhouse. Above all, she loves deeply without expecting anything in return. I've seen the way she loves you and how talking to you always makes her happy. I want to really make her happy for the rest of my life if she would let me." His eyes found mine and lingered. I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say here in my brother's presence. Darius studied us from the back seat, then he said genuinely, "All right, I believe you now. Sis, he's a keeper." "Thank you," Yi Shin said, and focused his eyes on the road. "You're welcome," Darius said, patting him on the shoulders like he was family. I gazed out of the window at the Seoul skyline and the river below and felt my heart full. My family has accepted the man I loved, and he just hinted that he wanted forever. What more could I want this time? The universe had a terrible sense of humor, yes, but it also, occasionally, had an excellent sense of timing. That night, the 5 of us sat by the Han River with food and late-night city sounds. Destiny joined us, because she never misses anything and Jaisu had also insisted on tagging along. Sometime during the night, Darius and Jaisu started a conversation that lasted until midnight and ended with them exchanging numbers. Yi Shin sat beside me, holding my hands with his shoulder against mine. "Hey," I called quietly. "Hey," he said back. "You're doing well with my brother," I said. "He likes you. I can tell because he's addressing you like a big brother. That's how he shows respect." "I know," he said. "I have a sister with the same attitude, too." "That's true." I leaned my head slightly against his shoulder. "Thank you for today, for coming to the airport, for everything. You don't have to thank me. It's my job to make your life better. That's how I show that I really love you. I closed my eyes for a moment, reveling in the moment, listening to his heartbeat beside mine and the laughter of the people I loved most as they cracked jokes. I whispered a silent thanks to the universe for making me take that cleaning job. The end. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me your team and where in the world you're watching from. I will personally reply to every single comment in the first hour. See you in the next story.